All right, everybody, welcome to this AMA with Dr. Curtis Kelly, who's joining us today from Japan. So thank you so much for joining us, Curtis. I'm really glad
Thank
you
you. Thank you.
Uh, can you tell us to begin a little bit about how you got involved in ELT?
Oh, wow.
And,
It's,
and Japan, why Japan for that matter?
wow. I got involved in teaching because I come from a teacher's family, and I decided, since all my sisters and uncles were teachers, I never wanted to be one. But I had to pay my way through college since I paid for my own. So I started tutoring and things and realized I liked it. And then I went to school in Hawaii, University of Hawaii, and fell in love with a Japanese woman. So that kind of shifted my interest towards Japan. And that's why I came to Japan to learn the language, which I just couldn't seem to do in classrooms there. I was a really terrible language student, which makes a good teacher.
That makes sense.
And I came to Japan for a year and got stuck.
Yeah, I think we
I'm
all
here for
came to our
40,
countries
yeah.
for 1 year, and then you've been there for 40 years?
Actually more.
Wow. Well, that's impressive. So I know I've got a question for you coming up soon about marriage but first I'm curious about the woman you met in Hawaii who changed your interest over to Japan.
Oh, wow. That was a long time ago.
Did that go
Yeah.
anywhere?
What was that? About 50 years ago. Jeez. Just, I was working in I don't know, how did I meet her? I can't even remember. I was working in a hotel. Was she a guest there? We became boyfriend and girlfriend, and she went back to Japan and I followed, but by then we were about ready to break up anyways.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So then a bunch of serial romances after that.
Okay. Do you want to talk about those? I'm always interested in
I'm sure. I'm okay.
stories.
I think for me, I'll say I had a lot of what we call exes, mistaken romances and marriages when I was young, because I was attracted to the dark, moody type, because it's just the opposite of me. And young people are always kind of attracted to their opposite, thinking it's going to be exotic or something added to themselves. But the research shows it doesn't work. And it didn't work for me. This woman I was deeply in love with, she just kept complaining about how her family was making her life miserable. I said, okay, come with me. But when she did that, I was the person who was making her life miserable.
Oh, interesting.
Right, you know, it's just, people have a mindset. You can't make people happy. They can only make themselves happy. So that's sort of the beginning of a couple bad relationships until I found the one I'm with now, who's right over there. And for 20 years, it's been great.
Well, that's really nice.
But because I had so many troubles with, romance and romances, I started to read about it after some breakups and things and learn more and more about what is love. Like, it's not falling in love. It's not real love. Real love is an attitude, something you have to work at. It comes very slowly over time. And so I actually made a course at one of my universities. I thought all young people should know that, so they don't do what I did. Made a course called The Psychology of Love, and it was the best course I ever taught. Even now, 20 years later, the students are still communicating and going to each other's weddings and things.
Wow. So what kind of topics did you cover in your Psychology of Love class?
That's a good question, because, well, basically, people get their ideas about what romance or love is from TV, from movies, and things like Notting Hill or The Graduate, where I really love her after all. I'm going to go rescue her, take her away from this other wedding. Those are almost certain to end up in divorce.
Okay.
Because the kind of couples that last the longest, according to the research, are couples that get married or not, I don't care. It's whatever. We're good friends. And, it's not the passionate ones. Because 100% of the people who fall in love with that kind of super romantic part fall out of love over
Mm,
time.
mhm.
So then genuine love is kind of respect for the other person and friendship and giving and partnering and in doing projects and things.
That's interesting. So,
Or about the, you know, go ahead.
oh no, I was just curious. So on your syllabus, did you have readings on different topics, or were you mostly like, let's watch this movie and find out exactly why it's baloney?
I don't think I use videos that much. I would now if I did it again.
Mm.
But like there's a, I wonder if I can find it. I'd like to share this. There's a love letter contest in this little country town in Japan.
Oh, wow.
And because they had this like very romantic park, it was sort of famous for a lover's park type place.
Mhm.
And so they had this contest for, you know, love letters, and they got like 5,000 entries, and they're passionate and fiery and, you know, and so out there. But the winner was a little old lady who was 80 years old. And she wrote this letter to my beloved. I remember the day in 1941 when I said goodbye to you at the port.
Mm.
You were wearing a uniform, and I had our baby on my back. We were waving Japanese flags. And you didn't come back, so I've always wondered, what are you doing now in heaven? When I go, will you recognize me? Will I just be some old lady to you because you're young and I'm not? And it was such a touching love letter like that. That was the winner. Are you touched?
Yeah, very.
Yes,
Oh my gosh.
I
That's
can see it even in
heartbreaking.
Zoom. I know it.
It's like, oh my
But,
gosh. Yeah.
but that was the winner. I give things like that in the class, and I say, okay, the assignment now is write a love letter to somebody.
Oh, wow. That sounds like the
And
best class ever, honestly.
it was pretty good. Then we'd study things like what kind of couples get along and what don't. Like most Japanese, if you ask them if there's personality types, calm, passionate.
Hmm.
Will calm get along the best? Calm, passionate mix, or passionate? The passionates fight a lot.
I would
They
bet.
throw things at each other. So psychologists thought they would be the highest rated divorce. But the calms are the winners. It's actually the calm passionates that have the most trouble
Hmm.
because they can't gel. The
Interesting.
passions fight, but then they make up. They're making up too. So they're second best. Yeah, things like that were interesting for young people.
That's fascinating. So if you were to give us like top 3 tips
Yeah.
For love, what would they be?
Falling in love is not real love. That's hormones. Dependence is not love.
Mm.
Everybody depends and needs to have people depend. We're social, but dependence, relying on somebody else for your own happiness is bound to fail.
Mm.
And the third is, at the heart of every good marriage or relationship is friendship.
Mm.
If it's a person you can be a good friend with, then you're going to get along.
That's really nice. That's very inspiring.
Those are probably not the best ones, but what ones came off the top of my head?
Well, that certainly marks them as something that will stick with you, something valuable, that made an impression to you.
So Lindsay, let me ask you, do you teach in colleges?
I teach at a university. Yeah, I teach budding elementary school teachers.
Oh, well, but it doesn't matter. But don't your students can't you pick out that they're having troubles with relationships? Not just boyfriend, girlfriend, because actually a course on love is about any kind of relationship.
Right.
Don't you think your students need that kind of training too?
Oh, absolutely. We have,
Yeah.
for my advanced students, we usually spend a week on like discussing love and romance, but we certainly don't get into the psychology of love or any recommendations or practical advice. It's mostly just discussing, their personal experiences and giving advice and stuff. This sounds like an
that's
excellent
a great
class.
source of information too. But yeah, but
Yeah.
I figured out, it took me a long time to answer this very simple question, which is, what's the purpose of education?
And what is your conclusion?
And why am I a teacher?
Mhm.
Is it to help them get better jobs?
What a cutie.
Sarah, she's in Korea. Do you like Korea? She loves Korea. And she went,
Oh,
I took her
yeah.
to Koh Tissot. And she, when we went to the airport to go back, she was crying.
Aw, bring
She
her
loved
next
us so
year
much. So
or
she's ready to go. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
By Zoom.
Right,
But
right.
it took me a long time to figure out what's the purpose of education, for my college students, to get them jobs, to teach them how to be cultured. What would you say?
To teach them how to think
Teach them
and
how to think?
live in the world,
Okay.
expose
Yeah,
them
yeah.
to different perspectives.
Why teach them how to think? What value does that have?
Well, I'm a big fan of criticality and always questioning. And I think that students should too. They should learn how to question everything they're taught, everything surrounding them, all of the discourses that inform how they think, what
Yeah.
they believe, what they value.
Oh, that's good. But why? What's the value of that
Why?
skill?
Fight the power, right? Always question the power,
They fight the
ultimately.
power. Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
make a better life. Always
that's
just, I
it.
guess, let's make a better life, right?
Yeah, that was a conclusion I finally came to. I don't know why it took me 20 years to figure it out, but so that they could have a better life,
Mhm.
so they could be happier, so they could succeed in life, whether that means getting a job they like or questioning authority and thus finding their own kind of independence, or why not having a relationship? Look at a lot of people that are unhappy. It's because of the person they married or their relationships.
Mm.
So shouldn't we be teaching that in college too? Intimacy,
Absolutely.
communication,
Yeah.
child raising.
Mhm. Mhm.
So there's a
Well, and I
big
think
gap in education. Yeah.
I will add though, as a very happily single person who has no interest in love and romance and marriage and child raising, um, I I still think it would be very beneficial, I think, to have had a psychology of love class, because
Yeah.
that makes you discovering that everything you've been informed by the media is absolutely false in reality, and having the scientific, and sociological research to back that up would be really valuable.
Yeah. And most of the students I taught weren't there to learn how to get along with their boyfriend or
Mm.
girlfriend. They were there to learn how to love other people, like their family or their friends.
Right, right.
And that, you know, in that those are the relationships. And the love letters I had them write,
Mm.
only rarely were those to a romantic partner.
That's really interesting.
They're usually to somebody else. Yeah.
Now, that sounds like a great class,
Hmm.
a great
It
topic.
was a
Have
good
you
time.
have you taught it since then, or was it only the one time?
I've taught bits of it, but that was at a different university. We could set up our own content-based course on any topic. And it was a super hit for the 4 years I taught it, because that's what young people want to learn. It's
Right.
kind of like when they opened the positive psychology course at Harvard and expected maybe 100 because it's an elective, and got 5,000
Wow.
people signing up for it. So yeah, I've taught little bits of it, but I wish I could teach that course again. Oh,
That'd be fun. I see
there
Dave
he is.
on. He's muted
There's
right now
David. There's
automatically.
David Sheffer, one of my heroes, along with, of course, you and Michael Free.
Great people. Here, Dave, you want me to unmute you? I can't hear him either. He's muted. Okay. I'll just let him unmute himself if
Yeah.
he so decides. Well, is some of the readings and coursework and units something you'd be interested in maybe making available to other educators who would like to integrate that into their conversation classes for those of us who have enough
Yeah,
freedom?
like that letter of,
Yeah.
yeah, I could definitely, if anybody wants to write me, like I might even, let me see if I can find it. Love letter. I might be able to share it in the chat now. Keep talking.
Sorry, Dave says he has no mic function. No problem. Okay, he's listening. Yeah, that'd be really nice if we could have that. And then from that psychology of love class, later you got involved in neuroscience, right? Was that the general timeline? How did that come
Yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah. Um, Trying to figure out what's happening with my students and myself, I got really interested in the first 10 years I was in Japan in culture,
Mm,
intercultural communication. But that goes so far. Then I got interested in psychology. Why are students, what do people think? Why are people like this? Why do students get motivated or not? And that went so far. Of course, all along with that, I was studying ESL methods.
mm,
But that didn't really answer the questions either, like motivation. We still don't really know what causes it. So that took me to neuroscience.
mm.
You see, I worked for 25 years or so in really low level schools that would accept anybody and still couldn't get enough students. So they got all the dregs of students who didn't want to be there, whose parents are sending them, but they don't want to be there, other things like that.
Mm.
So I had a lot of students that were really like damaged, especially their motivation towards English was low.
Mhm.
So that made me want to know what, how could I help them, or what was a block to their learning or other things. And that led me to neuroscience. So I didn't say that very well.
No,
I
no,
think you
I
get it.
totally followed. So I'm curious, how did you deal with those students with low motivation at the time?
Well, I just studied the motivation. Everybody's motivated,
Mhm.
but motivation towards studying something, you look like Maslow's hierarchy. There we go.
There's Dave.
If we look at Maslow's hierarchy or something like that, there's usually something else in there that's blocking their self-actualization, which is
Mhm.
what education is. Might be social problems, might be feeling rejected. It might be being bullied by some other member of the class. It might be this need for independence and not liking to study English because that's something that's sort of forced on them.
Mhm.
Might be living with strict parents, doing part-time jobs with a strict boss, and going to school with strict teachers all day and not having any sense of self-esteem. So
Mm.
psychology answered that, but neuroscience gave us even better answers, which is we learn what our brain feels it needs or what makes the brain feel good. So the role of emotion in learning is really, really high. The role of the social brain in learning is something I've been studying just recently, is really high. Like Lieberman, the guy that kind of taught us about the social brain, the pain from social problems, social pain and physical pain are actually controlled by the same part of the brain. So you have a broken heart, you could take a Tylenol or something, acetaminophen, and feel better. But we never think about that in the classroom. We scold somebody and make them feel really bad about themselves in front of everybody else, and then let them continue the class.
Mm.
Or somebody who just got bullied in the hallway coming to our class. Well, this is class now, so don't worry about it. But we wouldn't do the same thing if the person had this big wound on their arm from a knife. Let them just sit in class. We treat it completely differently. So social pain, pain of esteem, all of those things are really important for us to deal with too. Whereas we tend to ignore it, saying it's not, we can't deal with it.
So I know you've got multiple presentations and multiple publications about it, but what would you recommend that teachers do about that? About the social pain, about rejected people, bullied people, students with a need for freedom that's not being assuaged by their being forced to take an English class, or students with low self-esteem.
I think every teacher has to be a little bit of a counselor.
Mm.
And the administration always says, no, you don't have the qualifications to deal with a student with depression. Send them to the authorities. But the authorities are somebody distant that might meet them 1 hour a week.
Mm-hmm.
But we're the person that student might have come to and said, I'm having problems. So we have that trust to take care of too.
Mm.
So while we can't really offer professional clinical help, you know what I mean? We can't really treat students, we have to be aware and sensitive that they're having problems. And sometimes I think warm-hearted teachers help that student get past a bad place better than any professional could.
Interesting.
Does that
Well,
sound good?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love having a good rapport and a good relationship with my students, but you make me, I'm wondering, I've been wondering about something for ever since I started teaching, actually. Do you think there's a certain freedom in taking a foreign language, like an English class with a foreigner teacher who's not part of the culture? Do you think that opens up a space
Yes.
for students to, express concerns that might otherwise be frowned upon, or maybe the fact that they're using another language to
My
express
goodness,
themselves is
yes,
kind of,
Lindsay.
it's freeing,
Are we
right?
like family or something? This is,
Simpatico, right?
I wrote a chapter on this for a book 30 years ago called The Oxford Handbook for Teaching in Colleges and Universities, that English is really like the counterculture.
Oh,
You know,
interesting.
in Japan, where everything is so narrow and deep and reactions are all defined, here comes English from a culture where you kind of play it by ear, where you're not controlled by others, where yourself becomes the important part. So it's a wonderful addition to that really strict Japanese or Korean culture where everything's decided for you. And of course, young people seeking autonomy, which is built into their biological system at that age, are attracted to Western movies and English for that reason. It's
That's
kind of
great.
their way out of this confined space,
Oh, that's
confined cultural
fascinating.
space. Yeah, yeah.
I'm definitely going to look up that chapter, actually. I think that'll be really helpful for my dissertation that is not progressing right now.
Remind me, I'll have to send it to you. I think the book's out of print now. I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
sure.
Well, I'll
It was
remind
really
you.
popular at the time, but it was really just pure speculation on my part.
No, that sounds,
But people liked it.
yeah, well, that sounds, I mean, it makes sense. It really,
Yeah,
really
yeah,
does.
yeah. I
Now,
think that was true 30 years ago. I'm not so sure it's quite that true now that Japan is kind of westernized. But yeah. By the
I,
way, I'm trying to put the love letter in the chat, and I don't seem to be able to. Is it possible to make me a co-host?
you know what? I'm not sure if even I am able to attach attachments. But you know what? What about posting it later in the Discord?
Sure. Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd
Okay.
be fantastic. Very cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah,
Now, I'm curious, speaking of relationships with your students and being a counselor, I know you've taught in women's universities for 20 years, but you're obviously not a woman. Do you think that has had an impact on your relationship with your students, or an impact on you in some way? Like, what was that like?
well, fortunately, I grew up with women, a women's family, three sisters and a mother. So I wasn't like womanophobic. But really,
What's that word? I like that.
if you think about this kind of came out. If you think about education, it's been oriented towards men all through history. It wasn't until 50, 60 years ago that women started getting educated too. And so there's been this traditional kind of father orientation, you got to be tough. Sorry, you learn by being punished and fighting harder, this kind of sports coach type approach, rather than the more maternal, nurturing moral orientation. That's from Lakoff, by the way.
Oh,
He'd
okay.
use it for the way that we uh, choose political parties, the father orientation or the mother orientation for guess who. But I think it fits teachers too. There's the tough teacher. Sorry, that's the rule. You got to follow it. You got to grow up. So I'm going to punish you. And then there's the mothers taking care of the weaker ones. Where was I going? What was the question?
Teaching at women's universities.
Oh, yeah. So teaching at women's universities taught me this entirely different kind of classroom culture. I noticed if I scolded a student because she didn't do her homework,
Mm.
she was like this for the next 6 months, and all of her friends were too. So it's a lot more like discussion and nurturing and personal communication. Um, Group work and pair work was much more effective because the relationships were stronger.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So you probably know Mark Helgeson. He's been teaching in a women's university. And you look at his materials, and they're all kind of playful and cute, because cute's a big thing in Japan, but
Mhm.
that's because he's been working in women's universities. And for me, the book Writing from Within,
Hmm.
where there's a lot of introspection, there's a writing topic, write about something you're really sorry about, you wish you could tell somebody from your past, or write about an event that changed your life. Who are your role models? And those kind of introspective topics really came from teaching women at Kansai Gaidai, then Heian Women's University. So I learned this sort of new kind of love-oriented, based on what I meant before about love, that's relationship and respect, uh, way of teaching. And I found out it worked better with boys too.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
this
interesting.
pedagogy that I developed for women, like, don't get angry at the bad students, find a way to help them.
Mm.
Don't be the boss or the tyrant, be the coach. Junko, you've missed 10 classes, and the university says you're only allowed to miss 8 before I have to fail you, but I don't want to. I'm going to make some special makeup classes if you don't mind, and come to my office, and I'll give you 3 hours of private education so you can get those hours.
Mm.
And that kind of showing that you care is, I think, a pedagogy that works now with all kinds of students everywhere.
Mm.
So
Sure.
I've sort of unmailed my teaching practices over the years, and I think it's good for everybody.
Well, that's really interesting. I actually used to teach at a boys' high school, and then I came to this university, which is 70% women, and I found a similar change in my approach. It went from very active and kind of joking, but in a more aggressive kind of way. And, you tell girls something a little bit aggressively and they kind of freak out. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it
The
required.
top down. Yeah. Well, that's great. So boys are much more, you can get really mad at a boy and he'll be okay the next day.
Right. Or
But
teasing, you can
yeah,
tease
yeah.
in a little bit more, well, aggressive is the only word that comes to mind, really. You can tease them a lot more than you can tease
Aggressive.
girls.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but that's
I
interesting.
remember one time I was on the bus coming back from Hands Women's College, which is a 2-year college. And I asked the students that I knew on the bus, how are your classes going? You got any good classes? How's this class going? And their answers, which I'd heard many times in the past, always kind of perplexed me. They would say, this teacher, so-and-so, is really scary.
Ooh.
And this teacher, so-and-so, is really gentle. Well, I didn't ask about the teacher. I said, is this class good for you? Do you like the class? Then I realized that for them, that feeling safe was really important to allow them to study.
Mm.
They had to get past that. A teacher that scolds, and it gets really angry in class would make everybody kind of freeze up. You can't just scold one person in a class, by the way. When you scold one person, you scold everybody. But in women's classes in particular, at least in Japan, that seemed to kind of put everybody off from
Mm.
the potential of learning, self-actualization.
That's interesting. Now, when you took your lessons in Japanese, when you were actually learning Japanese, did you find a similar relationship with your teachers?
I was a terrible language student.
Oh, yeah.
I switched to Japanese because I failed Spanish, which is pretty easy. So I switched to Japanese, and plus I had that girlfriend, but I switched to Japanese. And I couldn't get any of it, I remember going to the lab, the language lab I was supposed to do every day,
Mm.
and push the tape recorder and said, this is a pencil in Japanese. This is a pencil, please repeat. I had no idea I should push the pause button when I repeated. I just got all anxious and never went again. But we had a kind of nice kind of Japanese housewife as the teacher.
Mhm.
So I used to make jokes in Japanese.
Oh, really?
Like instead of
Cute.
saying my hometown is Cleveland, you change one syllable and you're saying my stomach is Cleveland, or something like that. Make her laugh so I could get a passing, even though a very low grade. So I can't say that I learned a new pedagogy in Japanese classes, but I learned how to survive by joking around.
Right, well, that's important. That's
Yeah.
fun. So I think related to this, I know you've said your mission in life is to relieve the suffering of the classroom. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, as I told you, I was a terrible student. I was miserable. And it just wasn't fun studying, memorizing words, or I tried to learn how to the writing system, and I tried and tried and tried. It just wouldn't stick. Maybe it's because I didn't know how to study, maybe because I wasn't interested, maybe because I thought I have a brain that can't learn languages,
Mm.
foreign languages. But I've seen that same kind of thing with so many learners. You know, there's some that are really good that love English and they shine, and no matter what you do, they'll learn. But it's the other mass or the bottom 20% that feel like they're really lose their self-esteem,
Mm.
their sense of self, because they think they're stupid because they can't do well in English that I care about. So because I was a student like that, I've always felt that textbook writers, let's see, I'm looking for my, oh here. We should write interesting materials for students to use. Like I wrote this 30 years ago. It's basically a bunch of mysteries where student pairs get different pictures and they try to solve the mystery by comparing what they can see. So they have to use language. In fact, I did this at COTESOL 219 in one of my talks, this murder mystery, and everybody seemed to have a good time.
Oh, that's really cool.
But materials like that, or a writing textbook where they have to keep a diary in English, and it doesn't matter whether they use any correct expressions or not. It matters how many pages they write, to build fluency, like extensive reading, but writing. Or, as I said, the introspective Cambridge books, writing from within. English should be fun. Why are English classes so boring and miserable? If we know the brain learns when it's enjoying something, if we know that the brain takes in what it likes, then why do we make classes so miserable and so learning hostile?
Right, right.
And one of the big reasons is, and if you think about it, one of the big reasons is the social brain. We're always teaching the analytical brain, study this, memorize it, take a test all by yourself.
Mm.
Whereas now we're getting evidence that the social brain, you know, work with a partner on this, read this, then teach your partner, is much more effective in causing learning and certainly motivation.
That's really interesting. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because the best way to learn something is to have to explain it to somebody else. And
Yeah,
then you've
and
got all of the sociocultural work there that's coming out lately. Oh, that's really interesting.
Something we didn't recognize until just recently, but the social brain is our superpower. That's what I've kind of been speaking on the last month.
So if I were to ask you for tips to capitalize on this social brain superpower, what would you give us off the top of your head?
Well, first of all, I think most good teachers are doing that already.
Mm.
They're setting up things where students are, with personalization, where students are sharing things. And so they like to talk or write about it. But then the problem comes, how do we do it in online pandemic education? And I've been thinking about that and talking to people. Synchronous classes use Zoom with breakout rooms and put the students in breakout rooms at least 3 times per class. And don't worry if they start speaking Korean to each other, because that socializing and feeling good is going to make them in the right brain state to learn in the rest of the class too. Mark Helgeson leaves his Zoom on after class and says, why don't you have lunch together?
Oh, that's
And
nice.
it just leaves. Yeah.
Cool.
If you're doing asynchronous teaching, you know, watch this YouTube video and write a report. Here's a reading, do this exercise, send it to me. Completely asocial.
Mm.
Instead, watch this YouTube video, record your comments on Flipgrid, and I'm going to have 5 other people watch it and record their comments on your comments, so it's shared.
Mm-hmm.
Or instead of read this and there'll be a test on it, you read this one, you read this one, teach each other what they need to, what you know, teach your partner what you need to know for the test. You know, there are ways that we can make our distant, socially, you know, our classes that are so distant and asynchronous social as well, I think. I haven't really experienced what it's going to be like this semester when students are 2 meters apart in a socially distanced live classroom. But
Are you doing
we'll see.
face-to-face?
Yeah, starting 10 days from now, we're going to be face-to-face.
Oh, wow.
Every 9 seats will only be 1 student.
Oh my gosh. Is your classroom actually big enough to support that?
We have some big classrooms, so I guess so, but pair work, group work,
Oh gosh. Yeah.
unless we can use Zoom in class or something.
No, that's great though, because you have the quiet students who don't want to speak loudly. Now they have to learn how to project their voice, right?
Oh, that's Albuquerque thinking. Excellent. I love it.
We're good
I
at
love
yelling
it.
Albuquerque. All right, I know we're just about 10 minutes away from the end here, so I did want to ask you about your random facts that you gave us. Now, in my classes,
Oh, yeah,
love
yeah.
playing. I love playing 2 truths and a lie. And you've given us, a whole bunch of random facts, but only one is true. So for anybody who is watching this later who didn't actually see the event page, here are Curtis Kelly's random facts. Only
Well, can
one.
you read them? I don't have them
Yeah,
handy.
yeah,
so
I'll read them right now.
Oh,
All right,
thank you.
so only one of these is true, he says. Number 1, as a child, he lived in a log house and rode a horse to elementary school. Number 2, he wastes at least 6 hours a day playing strategy games. Number 3, he has 6 toes on one of his feet. Number 4, he operated 3 of King Kong's fingers in the 2005 movie. Or number 5, he is 18 months pregnant. Now, I'm guessing number 5 is not true. However,
Yeah,
the rest
okay.
of those seem kind of plausible. Oh, I think Dave Schaefer.
Oh, Dave Shepard just said log house. So did I. So he's a liar too.
No, Dave actually grew up in the rural area of Pennsylvania, so kind of near Ohio.
All right. He
had to
lived in a
walk
log
to
house.
school.
He had to walk to school. How far did you
No.
walk, Dave? Yeah, I remember I didn't ride a horse. We didn't have a horse. I grew up in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. But I do remember walking quite a distance, probably a mile, which, you know, for a 6-year-old is pretty far without my parents. And sometimes the snow was over a foot deep. Oh, Dave used the school bus. Okay. But which of those were true? No, I don't have 6 toes.
Okay.
I didn't grow up in a log house.
Okay. Do you play a
can't
lot of
remember the
strategy
others.
games?
Yes,
Or
that's it. That's it.
that's
I'm crazy about simulation games. They're historical simulation games. They keep me up way too late at night.
what are you playing these days?
There's a game that's like a historical simulation of World War II called Order of Battle that I'm stuck on. It used to be Civilization, Age of Empires. I've kind of gone through all of those. And even from elementary school, I was into board games.
Oh,
So when computer games came around, poker, love that, you know, just like games.
interesting. Have you read a lot of the research that has come out in the past 15 years or so about games as learning?
No, but I'd like to hear about it.
Kurt Squire, James G, a whole bunch of people whose names I can't pronounce right now. Oh, interesting. I've got some.
I know it's connected to learning. I got really good in computational math because I was in these war games with counters. I had to calculate the odds that these 10 pieces attacking, what the odds I would get a die roll or whatever.
Yeah, that's really
Something
interesting.
made me really fast in adding and multiplying. And
Oh yeah, there's a lot of work on that these days in the learning sciences field, and about how what students are doing and learning as they play specific games, but also the way that games themselves teach you. And then James G has a whole book about how he's extrapolated like 36 things that games do that are learning, and then how teachers can apply those to their classrooms. But I will send
How do you spell G?
Gee. Yeah, he's fantastic. I'll send some of those articles to you, but and the title of the book that I really recommend. But
Okay, good. Thank you.
seems
I'd like
right
to
up
know.
your alley.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to have a think tank on gaming
Ooh,
and games. So, are you an expert on that?
no.
Could you write an article for us? Okay.
I've read enough. I probably could. I took a class on it.
Yeah.
My
Yes.
math.
Okay. Yeah, add your name to our list then, just in case.
Talk to Patter Callahan. He's actually doing.
Better. Yeah. Okay.
He's doing something directly related to games for his degree right now.
Oh, okay.
That's neat.
Better. Yeah. I saw his name was on the discourse. What's it called? The disruption. What's that site?
Discord.
Discord. Yeah, Discord.
Server. Yeah, we had an AMA with him. He was our first official AMA after the National Council one. So that was before we started recording them.
I hadn't talked to him for about 5 years, but I do remember as soon as I met him, this is a pretty cool guy.
He is a very cool guy.
You have some great folks in COTESOL.
I think everybody, COTESOL's great. We've had some great people on for our AMAs, from all over the world. And we've got 5 minutes remaining. So I wonder, Dave, do you have any questions for Curtis? Or Curtis, do you have any last?
I have an announcement.
Final thoughts?
Cambridge University Press is doing this global educators thing from England, which I'll be one of the global educators on there, talking about the social brain. And the people in the UK said, why did you ask me to join this? They have all these famous people, Rod Ellis and whatnot. So, well, our guy in Thailand was at COTESOL 2019, and he saw your presentation and he really liked it. So he told us to invite you. So thanks to COTESOL 2019, I get to go to this kind of big event, and the number of registrants at this point is 11,000.
Oh my gosh, that's really impressive.
Be a big audience. Yeah. It'll be online, of course, but
right. Oh, that's very
so for me, it's a whole different level.
I think we just started promoting that actually in our Facebook group today-ish. But that's very cool.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of interesting things. So I'm looking forward to it.
Do you have any final thoughts or advice you'd like to share with our audience? How's everything going with you guys? Are you experiencing the same typhoon we are right now?
Yes, I meant to ask you about that. Do you have the typhoon too? I mean, we're close enough. It's coming up from Kyushu, so it's probably going to go your direction or ours. But we're getting a lot of rain today too.
Yeah, we're getting rain in my city, but it's not too bad actually. Little bit windy, but not bad at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's neat. It sounds.
I always feel like Korea is like a part of Japan. I know that's not very. That's you get in trouble with any Koreans or Japanese.
Don't say that when you're in Korea.
I know. But I mean, I feel so comfortable in both places, and there's so many cultural similarities. I remember once I came to a TESOL event, not COTESOL, but actually a TESOL workshop in Korea. And I went to the airport and I realized I didn't bring my passport because I didn't realize I wasn't feeling that I was going to a foreign country, so I had to rush back and get it. But
right. Oh, that's funny.
And I feel like COTESOL is just as much my group as JOLT is.
Well, we will happily adopt you and be part of COTESOL too. So.
Well, I have my certificate that I'm a contributor.
Well, you definitely are. In fact, for anybody who's watching this who doesn't know, Curtis actually writes a column for us for our quarterly magazine, The English Connection. So you can always find him in our pages. You can find him usually at our international conference. You can find him sometimes in the COTESOL Facebook group, popping around sometimes on the Discord server. And where else can people hunt you down? Oh, at the Cambridge event coming up. Where else can people find you these days?
JOLT International Conference will be online. And if any of your chapters would like an online presentation, I can be glad to do it personally. But also, yesterday I did a panel discussion in Greece with some interesting people related to the brain in Argentina, Canada, and Spain. And they would love to do some kind of a panel again
Really?
anywhere in Asia. So so if there's a chapter or co-TESOL group that would like some.
I'm making a note of that.
Of course, we in Japan, it's really easy for us now to do group presentations in Korea too.
Right, right. Oh, that's fantastic. All right, well, I think we're just about out of time, so don't hang up, Curtis, but I am going to end the official recording. Dave, you can hang around too if you want to. But
I will drop my mail address in the chat.
do you want to put it in the mail address, or do you want to put it in the Discord server for anybody who's watching this later? Yeah. It's up to you. I don't know how free you are with that. Okay, very cool. Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Curtis. And thanks to everyone who is watching.
And thanks for the advice on New Mexico.
Thank you.